Hi, everyone. It's Vince, and welcome back to Lessons in the Lounge. It's so nice to have you back here today. Today, I want to talk about buying a business, whether you should be buying the assets or whether you should be buying the shares of that corporation. Two hugely different transactions altogether. Let me start by talking about the buyer's advantages to buying, say, the assets of the business. A lot of advantages. So, number one, when you, as the buyer, are buying the assets, what you're doing is you're buying the client list, you're buying inventory, you're buying equipment, you're buying branding, and so on. And what you're not buying is all the legal liabilities and past liabilities associated with a corporation when you're buying just the assets of a business. This could be a huge consideration for you. So, number one is that huge advantage is that as a buyer, you're not taking on all of these potential liabilities when you buy a corporation. The other advantage is that you might simply just say, "Hey, you know what? I just want to have the client list. I don't want anything else. I just want to make sure that I get more clients. I'm going to meld them into my brand, and I'm happy with that." What are some of the disadvantages when a buyer buys the assets? Well, number one is that everything such as contracts, leases, supplier arrangements, employee contracts all have to be re-signed with you in your existing company. So let me give you an example. If you believe that there are some contracts that you want from the seller and they are extremely important to you, then those will have to be re-signed. The same goes for leases and supplier agreements. That could be tricky because it may not always happen and you may not get the contract signed over. So this could be a potential disadvantage when you buy the assets of a corporation. The other disadvantage comes from, say, employees, key employees. If you want to have certain employees join the company because you believe that the clients will leave if those key employees do not remain with you, then what you have to do is you have to re-sign all of those employees. And it becomes also a disadvantage for the seller because now what the seller has to effectively do is terminate those employees before they can join your firm. And by terminating the employees, depending on the number of years of employment that they've had with the seller is now in a position where he or she will have to pay a severance to properly terminate that employee to move over to your business. Let's talk about again from the buyer's side, buying a corporation. Well, the advantages, as I just mentioned, is that all of the contracts will automatically be transferred over when you buy that corporation. Nothing has to really happen. Leases and everything will automatically be transferred over, as will all the existing employee agreements. Now, let's talk about some disadvantages. Number one, because I just mentioned employee, I'll talk with that first, is that you are also going to be assuming all of the years of employment history with those employees. So if you have 20-year employees that come over from the seller, well, guess what? You have just bridged that employment when when you have bought that corporation. And if you do, let's say, want to terminate one or more of those employees, you are now going to be faced with having to pay the severance costs of dealing with that long-term tenured employee. The biggest the biggest disadvantage is that when you buy a corporation, you're buying the good, the bad, and the ugly. You're buying all of the past history that comes with that corporation. Let me give you a couple of examples. Number one, if there's any tax issues with unpaid taxes or tax disputes that have happened in the past, when you buy that corporation, guess what? You've just taken on that risk. If there's been any employees that have perhaps been improperly terminated in the past and they want to seek some legal action against the corporation, it's now on you as the owner of that corporation that they can come after the corporation and you could be on the hook for that. Anything that could be hiding, say, the skeletons in the closet, they could come out and they could surprise you quite a bit. Now, so how do you deal with those disadvantages of buying the shares of a corporation? Number one, hire a very good business lawyer to make sure that they have written an agreement, a share purchase agreement that includes reps and warranties, indemnities, and a holdback. Let me talk about each one of those very quickly. What it basically means is that you want to make sure that anything that happens after you've closed the deal, the day after, anything that happens the day before and beyond that, that's going to be on the seller's watch. Anything that happens after you close the deal, if it's your responsibility, that would be on your watch. So let's say we talk about a your watch, my watch scenario. So what that basically means is that anything that has happened before the closing date. Okay, so if the previous owner has terminated an employee or they've maybe fudged their financials and their income tax work, if that comes out of the woodwork and comes out and bites you, their watch means that it's on their watch and they're going to be responsible for dealing with that, and they have to indemnify you against that. But anything that happens after the closing date that you are responsible for, okay, an action that you are responsible for. So let's say you've terminated an employee, then that's your watch, and that's going to be basically your responsibility to deal with. A good business lawyer can craft an agreement that can spell that out to make sure that the my watch, your watch scenario properly spelt out in an agreement. Let's talk about a holdback. So I would insist that a share purchase agreement, you should be holding back as the buyer about 20 to 30% of the purchase price for, I would say, about 2 years at least. 1 year, maybe not long enough, but I would say 2 years is pretty good. And so let's say you're buying a company for $1 million, you would set aside an escrow in an account somewhere, $200,000 to $300,000 that sits there as a pool, so that if there's any liabilities that come out to bite you as the buyer because of the something that happened on the seller's watch, and you have to pay for something, well, that amount, that liability gets reduced by it gets reduced in the pool. So at the end of the 2 years, after if there's been no liabilities, well, guess what? The seller gets the full holdback. If there have been liabilities that have happened, well, the seller gets the holdback less the liabilities that you as the buyer had to pay out. So let's talk about why it could be in the seller's advantage to sell assets rather than to sell corporation. Well, let's say the seller has taken advantage of all of their capital gains exemptions. In Canada, US, UK, Australia, and a few other countries, there is the ability for small business owners to get an exemption and pay less tax if they sell shares in a small business corporation. So, for example, in Canada, it's called the Qualified Small Business Corporation Shares Exemption. USA, it's Section 1202, Qualified Small Business Shares. UK, Business Asset Disposal Relief. Australia, Small Business CGT Concessions. And Singapore and Hong Kong have no capital gains taxes at all, which is fantastic. So if, let's say, the seller has used all that up, then they probably really won't care about whether they sell the assets. But where it would be a seller disadvantage to sell assets is that if you are going to take over some of their employees, remember what I said earlier, that it's going to be up to the seller now to terminate without cause, to terminate his staff, his or her staff, and pay out a severance to those staff members. So that is a big disadvantage to the seller selling assets versus selling shares. So let's say now, what are the advantages to the seller selling a corporation? Well, as I just mentioned, there's the capital gains exemption. That is a huge, huge part. And I could understand why sellers would want to sell shares if they can get that kind of tax advantage. And from a buyer's point of view, as I said earlier, it could be very, very seamless to just move everything over when the buyer has bought shares as well. Now, in the situation where the seller is insisting on selling shares of the corporation, well, I think the buyer has a couple of options. Number one, not only can you insist on a properly crafted share purchase agreement that has indemnities, reps and warranties, and a holdback, but as well, I think what you could do is you can ask for a lower purchase price as well. Okay, now think about it, is that the seller is walking away with a big tax advantage right now by selling the shares of the corporation. I think you're quite justified in asking for a reduction in the price. You know, before you get into any deal, whether you're a buyer or a seller, what you want to do is talk to your professionals, talk to your accountant, talk to your lawyers, and just sketch out what would be in your best interest? What would be in the best interest of your staff, of the stakeholders of the business? Should you be selling assets or should you be selling shares, and vice versa? Should you be buying assets and should you be buying the shares? Make sure you have that decided before you sign anything on the dotted line and before you go in and start negotiating. So I hope that this video has been helpful to you. If it has, please subscribe to this channel and please give me a like. And by the way, if you'd like, why don't you drop me a note in the comment section if there's certain videos or information that you would like to hear and see me talk about. Drop me a note and I'd be happy to consider it. Until next time, think long term.